It's June 14th, 2016. We're here at Riverview High School in Sarasota to interview Mark Spreen. Mark, I understand you were born in Indiana and then moved to Sarasota where you started your music education.
That's correct. I started at Brookside Junior High School with Bernie Reitmeyer and never really did a lot with music in junior high. Played the saxophone. But when I came to high school, I came to Riverview High School and was in the band here, and my band director was Jack Crew. And Jack was the one that set me on my path to be in music and to be a band director.
Wow. That's great. After you left high school, where did you go?
When I left Riverview, of course, I had 3 great years at Riverview as a student, and the experiences that I had here were second to none. I was very fortunate, and when I left here, I went to the University of Florida, where I was fortunate to study with Frank Wicks, who was the saxophone professor there, as well as the band director. So I had private lessons with Frank Wicks through college, and was in the University of Florida music program.
Wow. And you graduated in December. How did that affect your job search?
Well, it was interesting because graduating in the middle of the year like that is not a good time to go out and look for a job. But somebody told me that I should go to the FBA conference in January. And it was the one and only year, I think, that it was in Jacksonville. And so I went to the conference, and while I was there, one of the professors from the University of Florida contacted me and said that there was a job opening for a band director in Fernandina Beach, which was only about an hour north of Jacksonville. So I contacted the school and went up and had an interview. And they offered me the job, and I took it. And so I started teaching there in January. Now, that was an interesting job because, first of all, I came in the middle of the year, and I think I was the 4th band director there in 2 years.
Oh my.
So there had been a lot of turnover, and there was a reason for that. My schedule that first year, I had 1 band class. I had 1 chorus class. And the chorus class that I had there was a full-time chorus teacher there, and I had the chorus class that he didn't want.
Oh my.
And then the rest of my schedule was remedial English. I had 3 periods of remedial English. So that was a pretty tough thing to walk into in the middle of the year. But I went in and we took the band to Concert MPA in March, and there was a couple of junior highs there that were pretty good, had a pretty good feeder program. And so there were kids in the high school that had been in junior high band. Back then it was junior high, not middle school. And so I went out and tried to recruit a bunch of those kids back into the program for the following year, which several of them signed up and said they would do it. But there's a thing called the master schedule. And the master schedule did not have but 1 band class. So I got all these kids signed up. I had enough kids for 2 concert bands and a jazz band. And I went to the school administration and said, I'll teach whatever else you want me to teach, but I would like to have those 2 band classes and a jazz band, and there's numbers there to support it. Well, they hemmed and hawed all summer and would never change the master schedule. And so I did summer band camp there for free with them, and I did a marching band camp before school started, picked out music and got them started with marching band. Still no change. And their school started a week before some of the other districts, and so finally school started, and I said, I guess they're not going to change this. I'm going to look around. And I found another opening in Keystone Heights. I took a personal day the first week of school and went for an interview in Keystone Heights, and I got that job. And I went back and turned in my resignation and left and went to Keystone Heights. And so they were looking for their 5th band director in 3 years.
My goodness. So when you were there at Keystone Heights, which was a junior-senior high, so you were sort of feeding yourself at that point.
Right.
How long were you there, and what sort of an experience did you have there?
Well, that was a really good learning experience for me because I got to teach beginners all the way through high school. And it was a nice, there was a lot of good band directors around there that were willing to help. And I'd ask a lot of questions, and I learned a lot. Dean Castles was at Lake Butler at Union County High School, and he really did wonders for me. Martha Stark was at Gainesville High School. Bert Cresswell was at Orange Park. And I could go to those people anytime and ask them questions or invite them to come to my band room and show me what I was doing wrong and how to do things and stuff. And I learned an awful lot from them.
That's great. It's great to have that support system. Then you went where?
Well, after 4 years at Keystone Heights, I went to Lake Wales in Polk County. And again, that was another fantastic place to be. The other band directors in the county there were amazing. Of course, Jack Crew was at Lakeland High School at that time, and Dave Foltz was at Winter Haven. Paula Thornton was at Haines City. Phil Wharton was at Lake Gibson, and Frank Howes was in the county still. Tom Bishop was alive, and all those people, Bill Miller was there, and all those people were just so helpful. You know, to a young band director, you could call them up and ask them questions. You could go and visit them. Bill Miller, you could go sit down in his house, and he'd talk band with you all day if you wanted to. And they would come to your band room and rehearse your band, and you could watch them, and you could always go to their band room and watch them work. And so it was just a fantastic learning experience. And to go and to watch other bands at MPA and hear their bands play was always a treat, to hear such fine bands. And then, you know, you could sit up there in the audience with them and get a critique of every performance. You know, after each band played, they would discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, I tell you, just to sit there and listen to those guys talk, you know, was amazing.
Wow. Well, how did you end up back at Riverview High School?
Well, after 6 years, I decided to leave Lake Wales, and I moved back to Sarasota because my family was still here. And I happened to luck into a job at Riverview. It happened to be open when I moved back here. And I started out the first year here just as a part-time teacher. And Dave Nauman was here as the band director, and I started part-time with him. And by the second year, we had enough kids that they would hire a second band director. And so I taught band and orchestra when I first came here, and it eventually developed into all band.
That's great. That is absolutely great. They're lucky to have you.
Well, I've been here 22 years, so it's been a long haul.
You've mentioned a few of the challenges that you encountered, like coming in the middle of a year and such, coming in with an already established protocol within the band or some history in the band. How do you advise young directors to deal with those sort of things?
Well, I had a couple of different experiences. When I first went to Keystone Heights, like I said, it was right at the beginning of the year, but I started working there the first day of classes. So we didn't have any marching band camp, and the band was used to having a camp and being established, and we started school, and they didn't know because they didn't know their band director was leaving. And she left at the last minute, and so that's why that job was open so late into the summer and right when school started. That's how I happened to get that job, was because she left it right at the last minute. She'd already selected music, and they had the music, but we didn't have a halftime show or anything, so we really had to scramble. And that first year there was pretty rough because the kids were expecting to have their other band director, who of course they loved, and here I came in, a total stranger, and I learned a lot about what to do and what not to do when you first start a job there, because I started to try and make some changes that I probably shouldn't have made just because I didn't know any better. But when I came to Riverview, I was familiar with the Riverview program already, and there's of course a lot of tradition here, but I was familiar with that tradition because I grew up with it. So I didn't really want to make a lot of changes here. And any changes that we did make, and of course over time you make changes, and even now after being here for 22 years, if I try and make a change, there's always questions about it. It's just, that's part of it. Whenever there's change, somebody's going to want to know, well, why are you changing that? It's worked like this for so long, why do we need to change? So you have to be very careful and think things through before you change something, and make sure that there's a good reason for it, and that you've thought it through well enough to know that what you're going to do is going to work, and that you're confident and you believe in it, and that it's going to be better in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, I know here at Riverview you've had some wonderful outside help. The great Charlie Corby.
Yeah.
Could you talk just a little bit?
Well, yeah, when I first came to Riverview, of course, I had all those other people that were in the community, but when I came to Riverview, Charlie Corby was already working here as an adjunct teacher, and he came in and worked 2 days a week. He had started that back, he told me in 1978, he started that when Jack was still here.
Mm-hmm.
And he continued that did that for about 30 years. And he was paid by the band boosters. And he would come in and do whatever you needed him to do, except he would not rehearse with the full band.
Oh.
He did not want to get up and work the full band, but he would do sectionals with any section that you wanted. And it was amazing what he could do. He could take a group out and work with them for one class period and bring them back, and it was a different group. The way they, just everything he was really a special teacher. And I was fortunate to get to learn and watch him work and learn from him. And again, we would have lunch together 2 days a week, and we did that for over 10 years. And just to pick his brain, and he was so subtle, you might want to try this, and this really worked well today when I did it with these kids, and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And just, it was a great learning experience. And the other thing that I really learned a lot from him about was selecting music, because he knew the literature. And that's the first thing, you've got to know the literature well enough. And he could listen to the band play and say, oh, this would be a good piece for them, and he would help select music, and just a master teacher.
Mm-hmm. So for a young director who is eager to play that piece that challenged them in college, is that the piece they should select for their first concert on their first job?
Well, probably not, but it depends on their band. There are some bands that you might walk into a job that has a band that could play that. It's probably not too likely, but picking the right music for your band is an important part of being a good band director. And Charlie was a master at picking music that would make the kids reach just far enough and make them stretch without overextending and doing something that they couldn't reach. It was always a challenge for them, but it was just always seemed to be the right amount of challenge. And so when you're picking the right music is a very important, and I work so hard to try and pick the right music, and I go through tons of music every year, even now, to try and find just the right piece for the band to play on every concert, just the right thing and we do a Sousa concert every year, and we play 7 or 8 pieces on that concert, and trying to find the right ones to serve the kids, but not only that, to serve our audience. And I think that's something that we lose sight of a lot of times too when we do concerts, is that we pick all these pieces that we want to play that are great pieces, but the audience may not appreciate. And we play to a crowd here, and we're lucky in Sarasota that we get a good crowd to come to our concerts, and they come and they want to hear different styles. So we try to play something that the audience will enjoy too, as well as stuff for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. While we're on the subject of audience, could you expand a little on how the community supports you and how you support the community, you being your band?
Well, the Sarasota community is a arts-oriented community to start with. So we're very fortunate in that regard that there are a lot of people in the Sarasota community that are avid arts supporters. So we've benefited from that. There's an orchestra here, a professional orchestra that we tap into. They have a youth orchestra program that the kids are a part of and that we encourage the kids to be a part of. The orchestra provides some adjunct instruction for all of the schools in the area, and you can call up the orchestra and say, hey, could you send somebody out to work with my trombones? and you get like 10 sessions a year, free,
Wow.
if you just call and ask.
But
And
the
so,
secret is you call them.
right, you have to call and ask. You have to seek those things out, and just like you seek out clinicians or whatever. So that the community has supported us in that way, as well as coming to our concerts, and the Kilty Band and Riverview Band and Sarasota has been around for a while, and back when Jack was here, he was the one that really put Riverview on the map as far as the band goes, and he got the community support and made the band well known when he was here because of all the things that he did with the band, and that has stayed alive over the years, because the band has stayed strong, and the community recognizes the band, and of course with our uniforms it's hard not to. And we do things in the community. We provide concerts and things like that, but we also do some local parades and things like that, and when we get calls to go out and do something in the community, we don't always do it, but we try to provide kids things for the community that we can, if we can.
That's great. That's great. Do you have some additional words of wisdom or advice you want to pass on to young or future directors?
Yeah, I think that we've touched on it some already. Seeking out help. I was fortunate in all the places that I've taught that I had people around me that were band directors that I could ask for help. And I asked them for help, and I would go and sit in their band room and watch them teach. I would go to other MPAs and watch bands and listen to bands play and things like that. So, I think getting out and listening to other bands is crucial, and talking to other band directors that are successful, that have programs that you respect, and finding out what they do and how they do it, and watching them do it, inviting them into your band room to do it with your kids, and seeing what they do. I can remember one time in particular, I had Dean Castles come into my band room at Keystone Heights, and I had been working on a piece and just could not get the kids to play it the way it should be played. And I had worked and worked, and the kids were frustrated, and I was frustrated. And Dean came in, and he spent about 20 minutes on that little section and fixed it. And I was like, it seemed so easy for him to do that. And I had struggled with it, but that's how you learn. And so I think that one of the things that I would encourage young directors to do is to have those kinds of experiences where you talk to other band directors and you invite them into your band room, and you go and watch them, and you go and listen to other bands play, like when I was in Polk County and sitting out there in the audience with all those guys listening to the bands play. I mean, you just didn't miss an MPA when I was in Polk County. You were there from the time it started until it ended, unless you were on stage. You were there listening to every band, and I don't know that I see that as much from a lot of young directors now. And that's one of the ways that I developed my band director ears, such that they was from doing those kinds of things, and going to other districts and state MPA and just listening to bands. I think you have to record your own band, and that was one of the things that Jack was adamant about. And I know you probably heard him talk about that. But if you don't record your own band and listen to it, you're not going to know what they sound like. Because even after doing this for as long as I have, I go back and listen to recordings of rehearsals, and I don't mean recordings of performances. I mean recordings of rehearsals. And I hear things in those recordings that I had no idea were happening. Sometimes good, sometimes not good. Mostly not good. But you can go through and then you can make notes and fix those things and address them. But you have to record your band, and then just don't give up. Don't let you got to be stubborn. You got to just hang in there and believe that they can do it, and stay with them and help them and work with them and just not give up.
That's great advice. When a young director gets their adjudication sheet back, sees a score they don't agree with, maybe or maybe not listens to the recording, and then gets angry, what would you advise them?
Well, we've all been there, I think, and usually you get angry first, and then you go back and maybe listen to the recording, and for me personally, every time I've gone back and listened to the recording and listened to the judge's comments, I've always felt like, yeah, okay, I get it now. You're right. I see what you're saying. So I would always advise that you go back and try and listen to the recording objectively. And if you still have a problem with it, I think most adjudicators these days are willing to talk to you about your performance. And I've had conversations about my performance with adjudicators before, and it always helped me to understand more, what they were saying. And we have some very, very good adjudicators in Florida. We're very fortunate to have the process that we have to qualify our people to be adjudicators. And usually those people are open and will remember your performance and can talk to you about specific things sometimes with your performance. And even to the point where if you really, and I don't know that anybody would insist to do this, but you could probably sit down with them and listen to the recording and they could go talk you through it. But generally speaking, it's better to take some time, cool off a little bit, give yourself a chance to relax and simmer down so you can think objectively about it, listen to the recording, and then if you still have questions, then you can try to address it.
That's great advice. You have always insisted that your bands play to a high level. How do the students react when you have them first sight read through something that they feel is not achievable?
Well, it depends on what it is, but usually they're, at this point, they're of a mindset that, well, if he gives it to us and thinks we can do it, we can do it. Sometimes they don't believe it, and sometimes they're right. And sometimes I give them things that I think they can play, and we work with it for a little bit and decide, well, no, that's not the right piece for us. So usually if we have something like that and we work on it long enough and we believe in it and are passionate about it and love the music and play some recordings and everybody gets excited about it and works on it, it's usually something that we can do. But there again is selecting the right piece. There's a library full of music that we probably shouldn't play, and I hopefully wouldn't pass those things out to them. So it's a lot of that has to do with what you pick and how you go about choosing it.
How do you, as a young director who is trying to establish themselves in the eyes of the community and the band as the leader, and they've made a bad choice with music, they've made an unfortunate choice with music selection, how do you advise them to back away from it, or to apologize to the band, or what, or fight it through?
Well, it depends. If you have time, if you make the choice and you don't realize that you've made the wrong choice until it's too late, you might be better off to just stick with it. And it's okay to admit you make a mistake and take responsibility for it. And if you have time to make a change, then you have to make a change, and of course you have to talk to the students. Be honest, just be honest with them and say, look, I thought we were going to be able to do this. Turns out this piece has more to it than I thought. I would try and take the blame myself rather than say, well, you guys are not good enough to play this. Try not to put the blame on them, but just we need more time to prepare this piece than we have, and try and find something that's more attainable.
You talked earlier to me about the importance of loving what you do and how that affects the way you approach your job every day.
Well, yeah, you have to have a passion for teaching and for music to do this, I think. And if you have that kind of passion and you love what you're doing, that will rub off on the kids, and they will start to have that same love for what you're doing and for what they're doing. And most of the time, you can get them to do whatever you need them to do or want them to do. They can see that, and it has to be sincere. And I think if you have that going for you, then there's an awful lot of things that can help. You have to set an example by the way, by your work ethic, and approach things. You have to be prepared. You have to do, extensive planning and stuff, because the kids know if you don't. And that was another thing that Charlie Corby was adamant about, was you have to have a plan before you go in there. And he always had a plan. When I said, can you do a clarinet sectional, he would say, what do you want me to work on? And I better have an answer. I need you to work on this piece from letter A to letter B. And this, and he'd say, okay. And then he would make a lesson plan for letter A to letter B. He would look at the music and say, okay, I know they're going to need to work on these fingerings, this rhythm's going to be a problem, this intonation right here. And he would know what he was going to address before he ever started. Mm-hmm. And so, that kind of planning makes a huge difference. And if you have to work hard at that, mm-hmm. and you have to know, what you're going to do before you do it. And if you're just going in there and winging it, like a lot of us have done in the past or tend to do still sometimes, because we just didn't have time to sit down and make that lesson plan up, usually that's not the best way to do it, and the kids are going to know that you're winging it. The better the kids are, the more they know, the more they realize that, and then you lose them. They're like, well, he didn't care enough about this to make it important to know what we want to do, so why should I?
Mm-hmm. When you have a clinician come in and work your band, how do you prepare the band for the clinician coming in?
Well, we've had a lot of clinicians over the years, and one of the things that I always try and do is, of course, have the clinician in before it's too late. If you wait till the band is ready, you're never going to have anybody in, because you're never going to say, well, they're ready. So you got to have them in and understand that there are still problems, and tell the clinician what the problems are. This is just like that little incident I was talking about with Dean Castles back mm-hmm. at Keystone Heights. This spot in particular is giving us trouble. Could you please work on this? And understand that part of the reason that you have the clinician in is to help you be a better band director. It's not just to make the kids learn to play better, although that's a nice byproduct. But the clinician, I always thought, was there to help me, and I could learn from them. And so tell them, what you need to have, what they need to give attention to, and then watch how they do it. And then, of course, prepare the kids. Tell them there's going to be a clinician in, build them up. This guy's coming from wherever, tell them a little bit of his background or her background, and build them up. Of course, you want to have the most professional atmosphere in that rehearsal that you can. Everybody's got to be there on time. Everybody's got to be ready, have their music, their pencils, and every time you stop, you pick up your pencil and listen to what they say and write it down. Mm-hmm. And, tell them that they need to get the most out of that they can. And, usually the kids enjoy having a new person, different person up in front of them, and they usually look forward to that, especially after they've experienced it a couple times. The more clinicians you have in, the better the kids like it. But like I said, I think one of the main things is to have the clinician there for you to learn from, and then treat the clinician professionally. Have them, give them instructions ahead of time, check with them to make sure they know when to come, where to come, how to get there. If you're what they would charge, if they expect to be paid, and have all that done up front. If you're giving them something for coming, have it there so that you can give it to them that day or that night before they leave. And of course, treat them professionally and thank them profusely for coming and helping you.
Well, I'm going to thank you profusely. This half hour has just flown by. It's been fun. You've told us lots of good things. And we just have time for one more story. Would you like to tell us one that makes you smile?
Well, I'll tell you a story. I don't know if it makes me smile or not, but it was at State MPA, I don't know, 6 or 7, 8 years ago at Vero Beach. And we were on stage at MPA, and we had just finished the march, and the fire alarm went off. And there we were on stage between numbers. The kids all looked at each other, and then they looked at me, and I looked at them, and we looked around, and fortunately, somebody there had very quickly contacted whoever they needed to contact to find out what was going on. And turns out that because we were ready to get up and leave and evacuate, everybody was, the audience, the judges, everybody was ready to go. And we just sat there for a few seconds, and somebody found out that it was a false alarm. And somebody had pulled a fire alarm in a building across the street or something. So we didn't have to leave. But boy, that was a scary moment. And the kids came back together. Of course, we were right there on stage, but they got themselves focused and got back on track. And we went ahead with the performance. But I never had anything like that happen any other time.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, sharing some of your thoughts with us. And now it's time to say goodbye.
All right. Thank you.